Hi, welcome to the LNG Pipeline and Facility Assembly, hosted by Sunrise Hill Climate Justice Club, Native Club, and National Honor Society. Our goal is to educate you on the dangers and violations that come with the LNG facility and provide an opportunity to take action against it. For this video, we interviewed community members from across Washington on how this would affect people, especially those who are part of the indigenous community or live in Tacoma. And here are their introductions.
Okay. My name is Neil Anderson. I use he and him pronouns, and I've been with 350 Seattle for about 4 years.
So my name is Dakota Wayne Case. I come from the Puyallup people, and I'm a part of an organization known as the Water Warriors.
So my name's Barbara Church. I am 74 years old. I live in Northeast Tacoma, and I live approximately 2 miles from the LNG facility.
Puget Sound Energy, who is building this facility, declined to be interviewed for our video. The LNG pipeline and facility will store, process, and transport liquefied natural gas. It's located at the Port of Tacoma, and this fracked gas will be used to heat houses and used in other appliances as well.
Is the violence that occurs near the fracking sites, and it's very well studied, well documented violence that occurs there, and it's because when a company is fracking, they don't have any community ties. They show up in a location, they install the drilling equipment, they pump poisonous frack water into the ground, and they stay there for a couple of years to extract all the gas, and they move on. And so obviously the people that would be doing that, the people that are attracted to that kind of lifestyle, have no concerns for the communities that they're operating in, because they're really just coming in temporarily to harm the community, extract the value, and move on. And so what happens is you find that um, they they often inflict violence on the local population. There's many of these fracking sites are near indigenous lands, and they don't. The people who are on those lands don't always have the same legal protection, and so sometimes they're even more vulnerable as a result. And so there's an organization that helps track this and try to help the victims called the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. And it's really eye-opening to go and see just how much harm is inflicted on communities when these fracking operations come into one of them. And so I would say that's one of the most immediate harms is projects like this drive an increase in fracking. And and that is extremely dangerous to the places that are nearby where that fracking is being done because of the industry and the type of workforce that comes in. So that's one. And then also these projects drive pipeline expansions anywhere along the route between the fracking site and where the product is finally either refined or liquefied. And so anywhere along that, there is harm to the people whose land is being taken to build the pipelines. Often they use eminent domain, and so people don't have a choice of whether or not the pipeline is going in. And again, often those are run through indigenous lands.
MMIW and MMIP,
Yeah.
if you look at it, these facilities, they're always built, like I'm saying, right on the side of an Indian reservation. So these Indian reservations that they're built on side of a lot of times are isolated. And so you get these men that come through there and they, you know what I mean? They get their horny needs and they do whatever and they go through and they kill these people. And I was reading about a facility that on the side of one of these facilities, they started finding these bodies inside of a river. And a lot of them were the women that were missing up there from their reservations.
Because in my mind, if it's a pattern of systemic racism that has been going on in this country for hundreds of years. These are central patterns about how whites have taken away means from people of color and indigenous communities. They do this both legally and illegally. It just requires them to turn a blind eye to people who have been purposefully margined for their own economic gain. And then in that process, they diminish the culture of the Puyallup tribe.
Yeah, so the treaty to live peacefully alongside the United States is our treaties. Our treaty was specific and making sure that anything that's a threat to the salmon is a threat to our way of life. And so you look at a toxic air pollution facility like the liquefied natural gas tank that they're proposing and trying to build down there in the port of Tacoma. It dumps, I mean, we could go down the list of toxic chemicals that it dumps into the air every day, but one of the main ones that always comes to mind is ammonia. This thing will literally be dumping ammonia, and it's so many pounds per day into the atmosphere, and it'll dump it for 17 miles around. 17 to 21 miles around this facility will be absolutely just rained on every day by every single toxic air pollution. The LNG facility, right, will dump all this off. And then you look at the pH balance of our waters. The pH balance of our waters so far off in the Salish Sea that the salmon can't even accumulate and immaculate at the mouth of our rivers anymore, right? They make it upstream, and it affects their spawning, the way that they spawn, right? They're not able to spawn anymore that they used to up on the top of the riverbanks or up there on the top of the rivers. And so we got to get our salmon, and we got to manually spawn them and get their eggs and make sure that they're going on for the next generation. So it's just like completely everything that's going on in the world is just like completely knocking everything off, knocking off the pollution that they drop into the water. And so, you know, with the LNG facility, it was just like enough is enough. So, you know, like we've been involved with fighting as the Puyallup tribe been involved with fighting it since 2016, and just trying to restore our waterways and restore our way of life, because it's just like we live in the middle of a city, and as a tribe that's as urbanized as ours, it's hard to maintain your inherent ways of life. You know what I mean? And hold on to who you are, and like we've done for generations now. So, you know, it's like you have to ask yourself, my kids are coming to this time of life where we have to know who we are, or we're slowly going to lose who we are. That's where they're proposing to build this facility. And not only that, but they're building it on top of a fault line, on top of a sand area. So as soon if an earthquake ever happens, and we know Washington State is known for earthquakes, if an earthquake ever happens, it can literally shake the ground so bad that this facility can fall into the ground. And then guess what we have to deal with? We have to deal with the toxic mess that's going to be there for generations to come, for PSC to make just a little bit of money. Just a little bit of money, they're willing to gamble to gamble our the rest of our lives, you know, and for lives to come. You know, your life, you're
Yeah.
at that age, you know what I mean? Like, it's your guys' world. We're here to protect and make sure that you guys are good, but we're still dealing with the mistakes of the past. And that's all this LNG facility is a mistake that these corporations are going forward as business as usual.
And it's extremely explosive. That's the reason that we use it for energy, is because it has a lot of energy content and it burns. But that does mean that when you get a lot of it, then you do have a serious explosion risk. And so that is also a danger that's primarily borne by the Puyallup, because they're living so close to it. The entire reservation is within the blast zone. But a lot of Tacoma is also, if you take a 3-mile radius, which is as far as the blast could travel in the worst circumstances, that puts probably a third of the city at potential risk. Where the refining is taking place, or in this case, where the processing, the liquefaction is taking place, that is a very polluting industry as well. That process is very polluting. It puts out a lot of particulates into the local air, and so the people who live there, primarily the Puyallup and the people who are living around the port, they are already overburdened with pollution. That's the port is a very polluted location because it's zoned for heavy industry, And so they're already breathing much more pollution than most other people in the Seattle Sound region. In fact, there's a map that shows the pollution impacts, and they're at the highest of that range. And so that's another harm from this project, is that another polluting refinery would go in and they would be breathing those pollutants year round.
Higher asthma rates, premature births, babies born with asthma, birth defects. I mean, we could go down the list of stuff that's going to happen, that we're going to see slowly happen from toxic chemicals being dumped on us.
So I think being 2 miles from this facility puts my life at risk because, for example, the city of Tacoma did their final environmental impact statement, and the safety risk done by Puget Sound Energy was just basically the land that they are leasing would, if there were any risk, it would just be enclosed in that land. But that isn't the truth of it, because the very next day, the city of Tacoma turned in their report, and um, their report said, was like um, the distance for the safety risk was quite a bit higher than, and out of that leasing property that um, the LNG facility had.
You know, PSC has this theory that everything that goes up in the atmosphere doesn't just stays up there. It comes back down and it rains down on top of us. So all these toxic air, all these toxic pollutions are just going to rain down on the top of us for the next 50 years, as long as PSC, if PSC is allowed to, for this facility to be turned on, we're going to have to deal with that for the next 50 years, as long as their lease is. And they claim that this gas is a cleaner gas and a cleaner source of energy. But you add in fracking, you add in fossil fuels, you add in the toxic air pollution facility, and this is the wrong answer moving forward for future generations. I mean, we're living in the middle of climate crisis right now. I mean, this weather that everybody's calling bipolar, this is the beginning of climate crisis, and it's happened a lot faster than everybody thought it was going to happen.
I believe it was a copper smelting plant to be built in the port, and that very heavily polluted the sediment under the bay. And then after that, they dredged that really polluted soil and then pulled it up and dumped it on the estuary where the Puyallup that's how they had access to the bay. So it was a horrible injustice. They really dangerous because we're close to some pretty serious thresholds from a climate change standpoint. We've got to get this under control, and we've got to start reducing our consumption before we hit any of those dangerous thresholds. And so methane makes that job much harder because methane is so much stronger a greenhouse gas over that time frame when we're trying to reduce it. And so that's what I would say I want people to know most of all, is that it's not just that it's not a better fuel, it's actually worse, given where we are and where we're fighting climate change and in the deadlines that we have to reverse the trends that we have right now. Natural gas is actually a worse choice than oil or coal. And so it's extremely dangerous for people to buy into the argument that this is any kind of bridge fuel or that it's a cleaner option from anything that it might be substituted for.
Yeah, they started building without permits, and that's one of the key things we've been saying this whole time, is that PSC didn't even have all the proper permits to start building this facility, but they pushed forward through this whole time with the simple fact they want to do one thing. When they make it to the Supreme Court, when it gets taken to the Supreme Court, PSC can say we're too far along in the project to give up. So guess what? They would, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would cause a little bit of friction, because PSC, that's one of the key things that they've worked on, is pushing this project forward as fast as possible, so they can say that it'd be a liability to their business if the facility wasn't allowed to be built.
City politicians were bringing this project in, basically for their own political gain, in my opinion. But then the LNG project was being kind of in the background, they were working on permitting it, getting environmental impact statements done, all while we were protesting this methanol plant. So we didn't know about this until a lot of the city of Tacoma had actually done their final environmental impact statement. There was a lot of political maneuvering, which was very, very frustrating.
They were trying to convince kids to love natural gas, and so they put out a coloring book and created some ridiculous comic character called Don Fuego. And so the kids were supposed to color this image of natural gas town, and and yeah, it's kind of funny, but it's also really sad to think that they would try to influence the minds of impressionable children this way. Um, I hope it backfires and that they end up being seen for the cynical tactic that this was. Um, but yeah, they are trying everything they can to try to paint natural gas as being cleaner, as being less polluting, and I think the reason they're doing that is just because they recognize that they're not going to be able to get away with that forever. People are starting to learn about how bad gas is, and people are starting to move away from fossil fuels in general. But what they're trying to do is establish as much pipeline infrastructure as they can, as many gas hookups, as many installed gas furnaces and stoves, because during this time when there is still this ignorance and uncertainty, they have the ability to build up our gas consumption. And then it becomes more difficult for us to dismantle it. And that's a similar tactic we saw with the LNG tank, where they took advantage of this loophole, which allowed them to build the tank without having permits. And the loophole was essentially just there was no enforcement mechanism. They weren't supposed to be doing it. They recognized nobody was going to make them stop. And so they did it. And what that means is that they have this tank built and it's ready to go. And so even though we are starting the tide is shifting away from fossil fuels, they could turn this on within the next month or two. And that's been their goal, is to turn it on as fast as possible so that it's already running. And so when legislation catches up and when our overall understanding of climate change catches up and we say, all right, we need to start moving away from this, well, this is already built and operational. And so it's harder for us to turn off. And so I think that's a lot of what PSE does, is they try to foster that ignorance and they try to take advantage of it by getting gas installed as much as they can while they can.